couple of factors that really changed in the schedule. Certainly the biggest one was just the chunks of time. We went from a schedule with 45 to 50-minute periods into one where the shortest period of the day was 60 minutes, 60, 70, and 85. That forced a whole lot of redesign in curriculum, redesign and sort of pedagogy. Teachers had to do things differently in the classrooms. And then on top of that, we knew that we would need a select group of teachers, sort of 25 to 30 folks, who were going to be able to teach the intensives. And they would have to prepare curricula that would last more than 5 hours, broken up throughout the day with breaks and other activities, but would have to have large chunks of time and would need to vary the activities quite a bit. The sort of the plain regular classes that are just sort of expanded, which are important there. If one of the things we learned early on in the research was that if you take 45-minute classes and instead of meeting 45 minutes every day, you meet 90 minutes every other day, it looks like the same number of minutes, but the fact that you're not ending a class every 45 minutes and the students are packing up their materials and getting ready to go to the next class, you've actually gained 13 instructional minutes. So about 6 to 7 minutes of the end of a period takes to sort of, students are already shutting down, they're thinking about what's for lunch, what's coming up next, what's my next class, and then they arrive to their next class and it takes them that long to even warm up for the topic that you're doing. So you eliminate that transition in the middle and you have a 90-minute block of time that's much more usable. That would solve a number of our problems and get us partway. The intensives, though, solved a completely different problem, and that is the growing need for individual classes to get out in the real world. So to take trips, to invite speakers in, to have things going on that 60 minutes even wouldn't do, 70 won't do, 85 won't do. And although they were trying to get these things done before, they would do so by sacrificing other courses. You would take half a day off from school and miss 3 of your classes. The intensive just seemed like an ideal solution to get people their protected time to do with it as they wish. I think there's a lot of variety in what teachers have done. Certainly people were planning ahead of time, trying to figure out how they could even envision this to be workable. And one of the interesting things is, of course, when we sat as a whole school together and talked about these, and we're talking about pre-K through 12 school, the upper school folks are sort of anxious about it, and faculty are a little bit worried about it, and the lower school people are just sitting there sort of nodding their heads like, this is how we teach every day, all the time. Students survive it, we do different things, and so forth. So we've actually been able to learn a bit from lower school teachers on what are some of the things that work, what are some of the things that you can do to mix things up. Faculty have just broken away from the constant sort of rhythms of things. If you think about a math class, for example, the standard template for math classes is you come in, you review your homework, the teacher introduces the new lesson, they assign the homework. If there's time left, maybe you work on some problems. It's sort of this rhythm that fits into 45 minutes. Math teachers love that model. It's actually very compatible with textbooks. It works out really well. When you've got 85 minutes, you can't necessarily just double that. And when you've got all day, you certainly can't just do that 5 times. So teachers were already planning for things like a 1-hour break down in the AC lobby where you would specifically go work on homework in groups, or where you would have a co-teacher come in and help you out, and it just wouldn't be you during that time. People have been actually inserting trips and taking sort of little moments away from the classroom that they wouldn't have considered before just because they have the opportunity to do so. And particularly in Humanities 10, they brought in speakers from the outside who could really make good use of the time. You bring in a speaker here during the school year and they can attend the assembly and maybe one class afterwards, maybe a class before, but now you can bring in a speaker for the entire day. And you can workshop with them, they can spend time with you, they can sort of sit back and listen to a discussion and then participate later. They can actually spend a worthwhile day with you and you're not interfering with anybody else's class. That's sort of the whole point of intensives. We actually do have some feedback. It's sort of an interesting thing. We surveyed families right after the fall intensive and got overwhelmingly positive feedback. It does vary by grade. Certainly the element of choice is very important for students. Being able to select what intensive they were going to have was important. We didn't survey the faculty at that time, and we actually just had meetings and sort of discussions with them. And this round we're actually going to survey the faculty because there are certain things that their experience sort of can guide us to do next year that are different. One of the things we do realize sort of coming out the end of this is that after the 15 days of classes, students can sort of be a little tired and having done a lot of work, and we have to figure out the routine of that. Faculty are really tired. It's a really exhausting process, and in a way that's okay, because that's why we're here. We're a school. The faculty are supposed to be working hard to make the experience great for the kids, but at the same time, you don't want to have 2 years, 3 years of intensives cause massive faculty burnout. And so one of our tasks for next year is to figure out how to ease things on the faculty side as well. And that may mean that you don't have a single teacher teaching all day. Maybe you've got some folks doing more paired teaching, assisting each other, switching on and off, relieving each other. I think that's going to be the biggest thing that comes out of this year, is how to make it more accessible and workable long-term for faculty. I think there are great examples, several this year and several that are coming next year. The Designing Solutions class this year, I think, was a really interesting use of time, because they were able to do their standard sort of science work in lab times and during the rotation, but then during the intensive actually took a trip to a dairy farm, took a trip downtown, spent time in a multi-hour project and did interesting things. The AP US History class took the trip to Charleston, which I think was an opportunity. Again, they could not have done that during the rotation. They would have taken 2 days out of those students' classes. That was important. One of the big things, I think, for next year is the Spanish 4 honors trip to Concepcion, Chile, which is happening in the spring intensive. Again, that was sort of one of our early visions about how this could really be used for language classes, to be on-site immersions. But sort of the whole task of figuring out the best type of classes that fit in the intensives, because you don't just take any class and put it in an intensive. It sort of should have a purpose of being there. So the Circle Arts class that's happening this year with the students is just filled with performances and activities, and they're sort of finishing their final projects at this point. And it's been great. And again, they've been able to focus entirely on Cleveland and arts and doing all sorts of interesting things. Again, they never could have done that under a rotation schedule. Some of the other feedback that we've heard from students, though, has been sort of what we were hoping would happen. I heard from a student the other day who's taking the chemistry intensive, and you would think chemistry, doesn't sound like a very exciting class. Like, clearly they're not going to be taking field trips all the time, maybe doing interesting things. This one student said, it's just nice to be able to do my lab sort of at a different pace. Chemistry is all I have to do right now. I don't have to split my focus in other things. And in fact, the schools who use this system all year long, that's their primary reason for doing so, is that it really focuses your attention on the single class. And there's some competition between that and the rotation. The fact that there are certainly courses in our schedule that I don't think we can imagine having all day long for all students. You just don't want to sort of impose that, just given our possibilities here. But I think one of the things that I know we were concerned about heading in was absences, especially absences during the intensive. When each day of the intensive is essentially a week of school, what would happen if a student got sick for 4 days during the intensive? And students did get sick. They missed a day, they missed 2 days. The assistant teacher helped catch them up, and that was okay. Fortunately, no one got sick long term, but I think we would have to handle it sort of as we do with regular absences. But that was almost a deal breaker from the start, the faculty concern over student absences, that if a student actually missed a week of school, it's unrecoverable. And that may be true. So that may mean that you sort of wipe off the other 2 weeks and the student repeats that part of the course at some point, and we make it work that way. But I think that was the only other big concern.